Ever heard of a real-life Pennywise in Illinois? A payaso who tortured and killed 33 innocent kids. Forget all the movie monsters for a moment. This video is about the real horror of John Wayne Gacy. On December 11, 1978, Gacy went to the Nissan pharmacy in Des Plaines to talk about a possible remodeling job with the owner, Phil Torf. While he was there, Gacy mentioned to 15-year-old part-time worker Robert Pius that his company often hired teenage boys at a good wage. Once Gacy left, Pius' mother arrived to take him home for her birthday celebration. Pius asked her to wait because a contractor wanted to discuss a job with him. He left the store at about 9 p.m., promising to return shortly, but unfortunately, he never came back. When Robert Pius didn't come back, his family told the police. Phil Torf, the store owner, said Gacy might be the contractor Pius went to meet. Lieutenant Joseph Kozenchuk decided to look into Gacy more. They found out Gacy had been in trouble before, including being in jail for hurting a boy in Iowa. Kozenchuk and two officers went to Gacy's house the next day. Gacy said he talked to someone from the pharmacy about remodeling stuff, but he didn't offer him a job. He promised to come to the station later but got mad when they asked when. He showed up early the next morning, saying he'd been in a car crash. Later that day at the station, he said he didn't have anything to do with Pius disappearing and repeated he didn't offer him a job. He said he went back to the pharmacy because he left his appointment book there. But Torf said he never called Gacy. The police thought Gacy might have Robert Pius at his house, so they got a search warrant on December 13th. They found some strange things there: police badges, a fake gun, a needle, handcuffs, books about strange topics, adult movies, drugs, a sex toy, a wooden plank with holes, pills, driver's licenses, a blue jacket, small underwear, a class ring with initials, and a receipt from the Nissan pharmacy in the trash, along with a piece of rope. Police took away Gacy's cars and watched him closely. The next day, Michael Rossi called the police about another missing person, Gregory Godzik, and mentioned Charles Hatula's death earlier that year. On December 15th, the police learned more about Gacy's past crimes, including Jeffrey Rignall's report of being harmed by Gacy. They also found out about John Butkovich's disappearance and linked a class ring to John Allen Seek. Seek's mother mentioned some missing items from her son's apartment. We'll come back to the story, but now let's take a quick detour back to Gacy's childhood and personal life before we dive back into the story and figure out together what turned him into such a monster. John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago on March 17, 1942. He was the middle child and the only boy in his family. Gacy's family was Catholic and had Polish and Danish roots. He was close to his mom and two sisters, but his dad, who had a drinking problem, made things tough. His dad would often say mean things and physically hurt him. In 1949, Gacy's father whipped him after he and another boy were caught sexually fondling a young girl. The same year, a family friend began to occasionally molest Gacy. Gacy never told his father, afraid that his father would blame him. Despite their challenging relationship, Gacy loved his father, but felt he was never good enough in his father's eyes. Gacy was a chubby kid and not very good at sports because he had a heart problem. He spent a lot of time in the hospital between the ages of 14 and 18, which made his grades suffer because he missed so much school. Doctors couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong with him, but his dad thought he was just pretending to be sick. In 1960, Gacy left for Las Vegas with just $136, aiming to stay with a cousin. He first worked in an ambulance service in Las Vegas and then moved to Palm Mortuary, where he worked with dead bodies for 3 months, sometimes helping with funerals. Later he confessed that one evening, while alone, he clambered into the coffin of a teenage male, embracing and caressing the body. He then went to Northwestern Business College and graduated in 1963 and got a job as a trainee with Nunn Bush Shoe Company. In 1964, they sent him to Springfield, Illinois, where he got married to a co-worker named Marlon Myers in March of that year. Marlyn's dad bought 3 KFC restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa. So, the couple moved there for Gacy to run the restaurants, and they were supposed to live in Marlyn's parents' old house. It was a good deal. Gacy would get $15,000 per year plus a share of the restaurant profits. Gacy set up a hangout spot in his basement where his workers could drink alcohol and play pool. Although Gacy employed teenagers of both sexes, he socialized only with the males. Gacy gave many of them alcohol before he made sexual advances. If they rebuffed him, he would claim his advances were jokes or a test of morals. He and his wife had a son in February 1966 and a daughter in March 1967. Gacy felt like his life was perfect during this time, especially because he finally got his dad's approval. 5 months later, in August 1967, Gacy sexually assaulted 15-year-old Donald Voorhees Jr., the son of Donald Edwin Voorhees, a local politician and fellow Gacy. Gacy lured Voorhees to his house and persuaded him that you have to have sex with a man before you start having sex with women. Over the following months, Gacy abused several other youths, including one whom he encouraged to be with his own wife. He tricked several teenagers into believing he was commissioned to conduct homosexual experiments for scientific research, and paid them up to $50 each. In March 1968, Voorhees confided in his father about Gacy's sexual assault. Voorhees Sr. promptly contacted the authorities, leading to Gacy's arrest. He adamantly denied the accusations, but the results indicated deception. Publicly, Gacy maintained his innocence, attributing the charges to political motives. Voorhees Sr.'s opposition to Gacy's nomination as president of the Iowa Jaycees. Despite some fellow Jaycees supporting Gacy's claims, he was indicted on the sodomy charge on May 10, 1968. Couple months later, on November 7, 1968, Gacy admitted to one charge of sodomy involving Voorhees. He was found guilty of sodomy on December 3 and sentenced to 10 years in prison at Anamosa State Penitentiary. That same day, Gacy's wife filed for divorce, asking for their home, custody of their children, and financial support. The court granted her requests, and the divorce was finalized on September 18, 1969. Gacy never saw his first wife or children again. On Christmas Day 1969, Gacy's father passed away from cirrhosis. Gacy was devastated by the news and was denied permission to attend the funeral. It was June 18, 1970, that Gacy was let out of prison early and put on probation for a year after serving about a year and a half of his 10-year sentence. As part of his probation, he had to follow rules like coming home by a certain time every night and moving to Chicago to live with his mom. When he got out, he told his friend Clarence Lane, who believed Gacy was innocent, that he'd never go back to jail and planned to go back to Waterloo. But within a day, Gacy was already in Chicago. He got there on June 19 by bus and quickly got a job as a cook. With help from his mother, Gacy purchased a ranch-style house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in unincorporated Norwood Park Township, Illinois, within the Chicago metropolitan area. In August 1971, Gacy got engaged to Carol Hoff, who he had briefly dated in high school. Carol and her 2 young daughters from a previous marriage moved into the house soon after. They got married on July 1, 1972. Just before the wedding, Gacy's mother moved out. Gacy started a part-time construction company called PDM Contractors. His probation officer allowed him to work on his construction projects in the evenings while he worked as a cook during the day. Gacy's first known murder happened on January 3, 1972. After a family gathering the night before, he went to the Civic Center in downtown Chicago early in the morning to see some ice sculptures. He then convinced 16-year-old Timothy Jack McCoy, whom he met at the Greyhound bus terminal, to come with him. McCoy was heading to his dad's place in Omaha, Nebraska, and told Gacy his bus wasn't until noon. Gacy took McCoy around the city and then back to his house, promising to get him back to the bus station on time. According to Gacy, he woke up the next morning to find McCoy in his bedroom holding a knife. Gacy said McCoy accidentally cut him when he tried to surrender. Gacy then attacked McCoy, hitting him and eventually stabbing him to death. Gacy said that as McCoy lay dying, he washed the knife and saw breakfast set out for 2 in the kitchen. McCoy had come to wake him up while carrying the knife without realizing it. In an interview after his arrest, Gacy said, "That's when I realized that death was the ultimate thrill." In 1973, Gacy and a young worker went to Florida to check out a property Gacy had bought. While they were there, Gacy assaulted the worker in their hotel room. When they got back to Chicago, the worker came to Gacy's house and hit him in the front yard. Gacy lied to his wife, saying he was attacked because he didn't pay the worker for doing a bad painting job. By 1975, Gacy told his wife he was bisexual. After they had sex on Mother's Day that year, he said it would be the last time. In October 1975, after a big argument, Carol asked Gacy for a divorce. He agreed, but she stayed living with him until February 1976. They officially got divorced on March 2nd, based on false claims that Gacy had cheated on her with other women. Gacy's construction company, PDM, was growing fast, and Gacy was working long hours, sometimes up to 16 hours a day. He also became a supervisor at PE Systems, a company that remodeled drugstores. Between PE Systems and PDM, Gacy worked on several projects at once and often traveled to different states. His yearly income was more than $200,000. In 1975, Gacy was chosen as the director of Chicago's annual Polish Constitution Day Parade. He held this position until 1978. During his involvement with the parade, Gacy met First Lady Rosalynn Carter, wearing an S pin, which indicated special clearance. This later caused embarrassment to the United States Secret Service. On July 30, 1975, Gacy met John Butkovich, an 18-year-old worker at PDM, while he was getting out of his car and called out to him. Gacy invited him into his car and then to his house to settle the wage issue. Once at his home, Gacy tricked Butkovich into letting him handcuff his hands behind his back, then strangled him. Gacy confessed to sitting on Butkovich's chest for a while before killing him. He hid Butkovich's body in his garage, planning to bury him in the crawl space later. However, when his family came home earlier than expected, Gacy buried Butkovich under the concrete floor of the garage instead. Gacy discovered a clown group called Jolly Joker. In late 1975, he joined and created his own clown personas, Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown. Between April and August 1976, Gacy tragically ended the lives of 6 more young individuals. These victims were identified as 18-year-old Daryl Sampson, 15-year-old Randall Reffitt, 14-year-old Samuel Stapleton, 17-year-old Michael Benin, 16-year-old William Carroll, and 16-year-old James Hawkinson. On July 26, 1976, Gacy gave 18-year-old David Cram a job with his company, after picking him up while he was hitchhiking. Cram started working that same evening. On August 21st, Cram moved into Gacy's house. The next day, they had drinks to celebrate Cram's 19th birthday, with Gacy dressed as Pogo the Clown. Gacy convinced Cram to put on handcuffs, but with his hands in front, not behind him. Gacy swung Cram around by the cuffs and then said he wanted to rape him. Cram kicked Gacy in the face and got away. By the end of 1976, Gacy sadly took the lives of 5 additional young individuals. Teenage friends Kenneth Parker and Michael Marino, 19-year-old construction worker William Bundy, 21-year-old Francis Alexander, and 17-year-old Gregory Gutzik. On January 20, 1977, Gacy tricked 19-year-old John Seek into coming to his house by saying he wanted to buy his car. He later admitted to strangling Seek in his spare room, saying Rossi was sleeping in the house the next morning. Gacy then sold the car to Rossi for $300. 2 months later, Gacy killed 20-year-old John Prestige and 19-year-old Matthew Bowman. Bowman's mom saw him last at a train station, planning to go to Harwood Heights for a court appointment. In August 1977, Rossi got arrested for stealing gas while driving Seek's car. Police tracked the car to Gacy's house. Gacy said Seek sold the car to him, claiming he needed money to leave town. The police checked and found out it was Seek's car, but they didn't investigate further. By the end of 1977, Gacy killed 6 more young men between 16 and 21 years old. The first was 18-year-old Robert Gilroy, a police sergeant's son, last seen on September 15. Gilroy lived near Gacy's house and was buried in the crawl space. On December 30, Gacy kidnapped 19-year-old college student Robert Donnelly from a bus stop. He took him home, where he raped and tortured him in a bathtub. Donnelly later said he begged Gacy to kill him, and Gacy responded that he would. After some hours, Gacy let Donnelly go but threatened him not to tell the police. Donnelly told the police about the attack, and they questioned Gacy on January 6, 1978. Gacy said he and Donnelly had a sexual relationship, but he claimed it was consensual and that he didn't give Donnelly the money he promised him. The police believed Gacy and didn't charge him with anything. The next month, Gacy killed 19-year-old William Kindred, who went missing on February 16 after saying he was going to a bar. Kindred was the last victim buried in the crawl space. On March 21, Gacy tricked 26-year-old Jeffrey Rignall into his car. He drugged him and took him to his house, where he tied him up and tortured him. Gacy then left Rignall in Lincoln Park, unconscious but alive. Rignall managed to get to his girlfriend's place and told the police about the attack, but they didn't investigate Gacy. Rignall remembered the car, the route they took, and some streets. He and his friends found the car and followed it to Gacy's house. Gacy was arrested on July 15 and faced trial for assaulting Rignall, but he easily got released. Now, let's circle back to December 1978, when the investigation kicked off and the killer clown was on the brink of being caught. So, in the first part of this video, we talked about what went down in the first half of December 1978. Gacy swung by this Des Plaines pharmacy to chat with the owner Phil Torf about fixing the place up. While he was there, he also mentioned job gigs to a 15-year-old dude named Robert Piest. But then later that same day, Piest disappeared after saying he'd meet up with a contractor. That set off alarm bells about Gacy, and got Lieutenant Joseph Kozenchuk on the case. Gacy's shady behavior and flip-flopping stories during questioning just made things worse. They searched his crib and found some pretty disturbing stuff. And around the same time, they started hearing about other people who had gone missing, shining a light on Gacy's messed up history. By December 16, Gacy was acting friendly towards the detectives watching him, even inviting them out for meals. He denied any involvement in Piest's disappearance and accused the officers of harassing him. He even joked about getting away with crimes. During the conversation, Gacy remarked, "You know, clowns can get away with murder." On December 17, Rossi told investigators that Gacy had sold him Seek's car. They found some suspicious fibers in Gacy's car trunk and used trained dogs to search for evidence. One dog reacted as if Piest's body had been in the car. That evening, Gacy took detectives out for meals and discussed various topics. But by December 18, he seemed worn out from the constant surveillance. He even talked about suing the police. That same day, they traced a receipt in Gacy's kitchen to a colleague of Piest's, who explained she had borrowed Piest's jacket earlier that evening. The same night, Rossi was interviewed again and was more helpful this time. He told detectives that in the summer of 1977, he had spread lime in the crawl space of Gacy's house as Gacy had asked him to. On December 19, investigators started gathering evidence for another search warrant for Gacy's house. Later, Gacy invited detectives into his house again. While one officer tried to note down the TV's serial number, another officer, Schultz, smelled something suspicious, like decaying bodies, coming from a heating duct. Previous officers had missed this smell because the house was cold. On December 20, investigators talked to both Cram and Rossi. Rossi suggested that Gacy might have hidden Piest's body in the crawl space. Cram mentioned Gacy's attempt to assault him in 1976. He also recalled Gacy's reaction to finding mud in his house and his involvement in digging trenches in the crawl space, which Gacy said were for drainage pipes. Cram thought these trenches were similar in size to graves. On the night of December 20, Gacy went to his lawyer's office in Park Ridge for a meeting. He seemed nervous and asked for a drink, then quickly downed 2 cups of whiskey. His lawyer, Sam Amarante, urged him to discuss any important matters, showing him a newspaper article about Piest's disappearance. Gacy picked up the paper and declared, "This boy is dead. He's dead. He's in a river." Gacy then started confessing, admitting to killing at least 30 people, most of whom he buried in his crawl space. He said he also disposed of 5 bodies in the Des Plaines River. Gacy described his victims as male prostitutes and hustlers, claiming he believed they were his property. He mentioned waking up to find dead, strangled kids with their hands cuffed behind their backs. Later, police drafted a second search warrant to look for Pia's body in his crawl space. With the new search warrant, they found human remains in the crawl space, indicating multiple victims. After learning that human remains were found in his crawl space and that he would face murder charges, Gacy expressed a desire to explain himself. In the early hours of December 22, with his lawyers present, Gacy confessed to killing about 30 young males, claiming they all willingly entered his house. Accompanied by police, his lawyers, and his older sister, Gacy was driven to the I-55 bridge on December 23 to indicate where he confessed to throwing the body of Robert Piest and 4 other victims into the river. Gacy also drew a rough diagram of his basement to help officers locate the buried bodies. Over the following week, 26 bodies were found in Gacy's crawl space, and 3 others were discovered elsewhere on his property. As the flooring and walls of the property were removed, more evidence like identification cards and additional deviant sex books were found. Gacy's trial began on February 6, 1980, where he faced charges for 33 murders. The trial took place in Cook County, Illinois, with Judge Louis Garippo presiding over the case and the jury selected from Rockford due to extensive media coverage in Cook County. During the trial, Gacy's defense presented him as a Jekyll and Hyde character, arguing that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia with multiple personalities. Prosecutors contended that Gacy was sane and fully responsible for his actions. Witnesses testified to Gacy's premeditation and efforts to avoid detection. Witnesses, including victims of Gacy's crimes, testified to the horrors they endured. Some witnesses became emotional, with one vomiting during cross-examination. Gacy himself wrote a letter to the judge requesting a mistrial, expressing dissatisfaction with his defense strategy and claiming that police had lied about his statements. On March 11, the prosecution and defense presented their final arguments. Prosecutor Terry Sullivan emphasized Gacy's history of abusing young people, his attempts to evade detection, and the devastating impact on his surviving victims. He described Gacy as one of the most prolific murderers, expressing concern about how close Gacy came to avoiding justice. Defense attorney Sam Amarante countered by accusing Sullivan of neglecting evidence and inciting hatred against Gacy. He portrayed Gacy as someone driven by uncontrollable impulses and argued that the state hadn't proven Gacy's sanity beyond a reasonable doubt. Amarante urged the jury to deliver a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity, highlighting Gacy's danger to himself and others. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Gacy guilty on all 33 murder charges, as well as charges of sexual assault and indecent liberties with a child related to Robert Piest. Before his trial, Gacy reached out to journalist Russ Ewing and granted multiple interviews between 1979 and 1981. Their collaboration led to the publication of the book Buried Dreams, which provided crucial information about his first victim. Finally, in May 1994, the Illinois Supreme Court set a formal date for his execution. On the morning of May 9, 1994, Gacy was moved to Statesville Correctional Center for his execution. For his last meal, he requested KFC, French fries, deep-fried shrimp, strawberries, and a Diet Coke. As the execution approached, a crowd of over 1,000 people gathered outside the correctional center, with most supporting the execution. However, some anti-death penalty protesters were also present. Before the execution could start, there was an unexpected issue with the IV tube due to the chemicals solidifying. After fixing the problem, the execution proceeded, lasting 18 minutes. One prosecutor at Gacy's trial, William Kunkel, said, "He got a much easier death than any of his victims." John Wayne Gacy was eventually arrested and executed for the terrible crimes he committed. But what about other monsters like Ted Bundy, Richard Ramirez, and Jeffrey Dahmer? If you're interested in watching more documentaries about serial killers, hit subscribe, so you never miss out on our latest videos.